Why is radical self-awareness so important? I mean, why is building a better you good for business? Well, today we're going to find out, entrepreneurs. Welcome to the Possibility Partners Show. I'm your host, Ande Lyons, your Chief Possibility Officer, and every Tuesday, right here in Google Plus Hangouts on air at 1 p.m. Eastern, you're going to find me sharing Andelicious advice for you entrepreneurial adventurers. And these are delicious conversations with seasoned entrepreneurs, all sharing their best tips, tools, and resources to help all of us keep our businesses humming along. And gosh, I am so thrilled you turned into the show today. Whether you're watching live, hi, or via replay, mwah, I am thrilled you're here. Thank you, thank you. And let's connect and engage elsewhere. I mean, my favorite my favorite social media platform on Twitter. I love connecting there. I'm at Ande Lyons. Also, to stay engaged with your business, I've got great advice at my website, andelyons.com. And I sure would love it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, Andelicious Advice. Thank you so much. So today we're going to go deep into radical self-awareness with our guest, Chief Radical Officer, founder of the Human Innovation Garage, and a Bostonian who I have had the sincere pleasure to hurl with. That's right, hang out in real life. I am so honored and pleased to introduce you to Stephan Thieringer. Hey, Stephan, say
Hey,
hello
Andy.
to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. And nothing like hurling with Andy, right?
Exactly. I'll put a picture into the comment stream, folks. But I'm so thrilled you're here sharing your dose of entrepreneurial wisdom, because what an entrepreneurial adventure you have had, Stephan. I've heard your stories. They've left my jaw, hanging open going, oh, and my sitting here going, and then what happened? And then what happened? So I'm so thrilled you're here today. Before we dive into radical self-awareness, though, let's talk about your adventures. How did you get started? What called you to be an entrepreneur? I mean, you've been all over the map in working for people, as well as having your own businesses, selling your businesses, being a real innovator and a radical, edgy entrepreneur. Go ahead, share.
Sure. All over the place is never a good thing, right? When people tell you you're all over the place, but it is true. I think I said last night to my students in class, I said, as entrepreneurs, we're addicts. We should all be standing in a circle and pray with each other and hold each other's hands. It's a roller coaster. So as you know, my stories, it's been for me, particularly in the space of education, really more than a decade and a half. In K through 12 in the United States. It was also international, particular in some emerging countries like India. The fun is people. It's the impact on people. And for me, really, the big piece has become social impact and how to make a difference with people, how to make a difference in people, and the access and privileges and rights and opportunities people have. And I think that's ultimately what's kind of fast forwarded me also to the Human Innovation Garage, which is human innovation and tools, the garage. Come and park yourself a little bit with us, and we'll try to get you tuned up.
That's right. And I really appreciate what you say, because I often stand up, and folks who are watching will recall seeing me do this at events that I go to. I go, hi, hello, my name is Ande, and I am a entrepreneur. And I have been unemployable since 1992. There is that little bit of a 12-step course that sometimes we feel we're on as entrepreneurs. Now, you had been in the hospitality industry for a while, but then you got all smarty pants, innovation, technology, etc. when you started to say, hey, I want to see, open education, online resources, all of that. Share that story with everyone, because I think that's so important as far as taking an idea and implementing it like you did.
Open education was really something. I think once my last hotel and property was in New York. Coming out of a large people environment, we had 1,400, 1,500 employees in that particular property. And having been in that business for a long time, it becomes also an engagement with people. It becomes a question of, how do you access certain resources, as I said earlier. And I met a couple of gentlemen which brought me into the space of application service provider, which was what SaaS was used to be called, software as a service. Now the big new word is PaaS, platform as a service. And we built an online learning system, which was at that time one of the first learning management systems, where we trained for, at that time, sexual harassment, discrimination, and diversity, which was in the late 90s, was a huge factor, obviously, for liability in the United States. And very quickly we realized, and here's the first entrepreneurial advice, focus and be competent in one core competency area. Because what we very quickly realized, we either had to be platform or we had to be content. We couldn't be both. And
why is that? Why is that?
Well, because you can't be good at both. You have to really focus, specialize, and become a master at one rather than mediocre at many. And we became very, very good at the platform side, and we built one of the first LMS online learning systems at that time, which was a SaaS platform focused on a very particular core, very solution driven. Again, it was not, the sexiness was not about the fact, oh, we're a platform where you do online learning. The sexy part was, you're a company who needs to provide compliance training. We have the solution for that. And that was really the value proposition. So the WIFM as a company, what's in it for me, was very, very important. And we kind of drove that to the point of ultimately selling the company in 2006 to a publishing house in Italy, which was quite the story, because it was Giunti Editore, which did the first Pinocchio and did Dante's works and did the Da Vinci Codices replicas. So there was also a lot of history, which was not just a great story because we got an M&A done, but it was a great story because we learned so much also being German, but going back to the Italian bookbinding heritage and the beauty of that, we learned so much about that. So it was really kind of a full circle journey. And then after that, 2 years later, I was introduced to a gentleman in India who was very close with one of the great icons in India, who was credited with the telecommunications revolution, Dr. Sam Petroda, who was at that time resident in Chicago. And he taught me everything I know about India today and gave me the privilege of traveling India over the last 5 years, about a year and a half condensed. And, it was a journey. I fell in love with India. I really got to know India very, very well. And for us then was the iTunes in education, so to speak, where we took open content from MIT and 223 other institutions, which is kind of that conglomerate of open content, which is the Open Content Consortium. And we delivered that in kind of a very flexible, modular manner to schools in K through 12 space and colleges in India on a $60 tablet. And the trigger really here was for us, we said, we have a content tablet, but a tablet just but an enabler is a tool. Without content, there's no value. So India had just come out with Akash, which was an initiative by the Human Resource Department, which is the equivalent of the Department of Education, under which that falls under. And we went out and did that and got tremendous attention, released that in early 2012. And it was fascinating. The reaction was tremendous.
Well, clearly you've been pursuing things that really tapped into a passion for you. How did you know those things were going to be meaningful for you?
I think you expose yourself to certain situations, and it goes back to why we're here in the first place, right? And kind of that awareness, that sensitivity towards your own gut, where you say, this feels right or it doesn't feel right. And more often than not more often than not, in probably 98% of the times that I have gone against my gut, and we overanalyze and we're trying to find 50 reasons why we should not. Your instinctual initial gut, trust me, also everybody who's listening, go with it. Because every time I've gone against it, something came up where I said in retrospect, I knew better, but I still decided to go against it.
That's excellent advice. And you also did something that's very important, which is you took some time off for some self-awareness, right?
I did. So fast forward to late of 2012, for various reasons, over a course of 3 months, I got to really the result of what happened on a Friday afternoon. That I looked at my personal assistant, and I said, Katie, I don't think I'm going to come back on Monday. And she looked at me and she said, you're crazy. You are. You're just making that up. And I said, no, I don't think I'm going to come back. And I had spoken to my chairman of the board. I talked to the majority investor, and I said, I think I'm just, after 5 years, I'm just done. And I literally left on Friday afternoon. The funny part about it was, as I left, Katie decided, like about 30 minutes later, she's leaving with me. And so we both marched, and I haven't really looked back. I mean, there's, particularly when it's your company and you've founded it and you've really grown it to a certain point, there's anger, there's disappointment, there's sadness. But that was actually, again, kind of an exercise of radical self-awareness. And I came to the point of really, for a year, really trying to see what is it that I want to do, and where's my passion, where's my compassion, and where's the impact I can make. And that really brought me to the Human Innovation Garage, where in a very, I want to say authentic way, people started calling and saying, hey, can you help me with this? And what should I do here? So the mentoring, the coaching, also in some of the previous ventures I was engaged in, and still on the nonprofit side I engaged in, if that is Street Soccer USA, which deals with homeless people, bringing them back on the principles of football and soccer, into integrating and reintegrating into society, of its network for teaching entrepreneurship, if it's a citizen school, or if it's a city year, all these various organizations I'm touching and have touched in my past. There has always been a deep impact to it, and not just kind of quickly touching people. And that's that big thing versus legend versus legacy. But to have somewhat of an influence, to see that you make a difference, which is also why I teach today in an entrepreneurship department here at a university in Boston, because the energy of being able to relate some knowledge, but not just talking at people, but actually kind of to have them really, grasp it and see it and do it and take it up and then do their own thing, and supporting that and enabling that. That's really become my passion.
I love what you said about legend versus legacy, right, viewers? Oh my gosh, that's so important. And tell everybody the course that you teach here in Boston at Suffolk University, which is a beloved university here in Boston, because it's such a great name.
Yeah, so I just actually finished teaching green and sustainable business for an MBA course. And now I just, actually yesterday, we had our first summer class, which is an e-project opportunity where the students come together. It's a summer course where we then pick actually a client, and the client is being interviewed by the students in the classroom. And then the students in project management principles are responding to what the client has laid out as a problem over the course of 10 weeks. And then there's a final client presentation from the students to the client. And then in the fall, I'm teaching 2 classes about, and we are, besides in terms of the creativity and innovation component, one of the few schools in the country. There's another course very similar at Stanford University, where we're talking about creativity and innovation, and the whole faculty in various dimensions is participating. If that's theater, if that's human resources, if that's history, mathematics, etc. It all kind of drives towards creativity and innovation. And the course I suggested, and grateful to Suffolk they accepted it, was a course with the title Human Innovation, and under the headline of The Entrepreneur's Cocktail: Human Innovation, Creativity, and Hard Work. And all those 3 components, as everybody who's listening knows, those are components everybody needs. But being able to take the nose off that box, which is clear, and we sit on the outside and we say, we're thinking outside the box. Well, take your nose off and look in another direction, because that box sometimes is still so contained that even with the nose on the outside, it just is not enough. And being able to do that with kids, and if they're MBA students, if they're people who come out of their first, second job, and being able to say, here's an idea journal. And that's one of the things I'm doing with the class. Here's an idea journal. Everything you see, which you kind of throw a paper tissue in the air and see what happens to it. That type of an attitude, to be, curiosity is a big piece. Somebody we both know well speaks a lot about curiosity and about grace, but pick your curiosity, but be curious, be open-minded, which then also directly, immediately leads to vulnerability and all these various pieces. That's the exciting part about it.
Oh, it's so exciting, and so are you, Stephan. I'm so thrilled you're here, right, viewers? These are really tremendous insights Stephan is sharing today, and you can hop onto his website, humaninnovationgarage.com, to learn more and explore. And remember, for you live viewers, and really I'm going to be talking to you replay viewers as well, a wonderful way to connect with other entrepreneurs and have a conversation is in the Afterglow chat. And that's when I hit end broadcast to this show. I share the link in the comment section, and it's unrecorded. You can even leave your video off. We just hear your wonderful, delicious voice, but we would love to see you in the room after the show, because this is where even deeper connection can happen, which is so important for our entrepreneurial adventures. I have a few live participants whose comments I want to share. We have Blair Glazer talking about these quiet transition times seem to be a rite of passage for entrepreneurs who have a need to do work in line with their core values. Wow.
Blair, let me allow me to jump in, Andy. Blair, I couldn't agree with you more. One of the gentlemen I had the privilege to be a mentor in the New York Venture Fellows program 3 years back. And the gentleman I was assigned to and who was given to me as a mentee was really somebody who I probably learned as much from as he learned from me, I hope. It's very timely that we talk about it, because he just had a big event 2 days ago in New York. Who I'm talking about is Adam Brown. He wrote a book about how an ordinary person can affect extraordinary change. Within 2 weeks, it was a New York bestseller. He's in his early 30s, and he founded an organization called Pencils of Promise, which is a nonprofit organization where we build schools in African continents. And he is, in terms of authenticity and taking his time to reflect on what he does and how he does it, but finding it all back to core values, which is the big appeal I'm putting out to everybody. Because I think in times of pressure, in times of stress, in times of complete disarray of whatever you anticipate may happen, but something completely different happens, to be able to go back and say, this is what I really, really stand for. This is what I represent in core values, in integrity. Integrity is not a choice. It's like you either are or you're not. You're either in integrity or you're out. It's not something where you wake up in the morning and you say, today I'm going to be operating with high integrity. No, it's like the Japanese proverb, right? Where you have three faces. One face is for your family and for your friends. One face is for business. And the third phase was the hardest face to face, is the face you see every morning when you get up and look in the mirror. And that is the reality of where integrity is being made or not made, where you're just with yourself and you're looking at yourself and you're saying, what do I really stand for? And I think it's a great question to ask yourself that. And what's interesting too, I was having a conversation actually with the chairman of the art department of Suffolk, and she told me something interesting. She's from New York, and she's told me about a project and a fellow artist did. She made a mirror for one of their bathrooms, which was a shared bathroom. How do you say in English?
Restroom?
Yeah, but a male and female shared. So
co-ed.
Thank you. And she said, it's really interesting. So what she did is she scratched the back of the mirror away. So when you would look in the mirror, it would say, this face is not you. And she thought it was so interesting when you would go into the restrooms and you'd wash your hands and you look at that mirror, it would remind you of sometimes a different reality than from what we see and we want to be perceived. And that's the other piece, wanting to be perceived a certain way versus authenticity and just being okay with what people see or don't see.
I know, and that's where a lot of people are stretching into, especially with their businesses, Stephan. It's amazing, the growth opportunity that we have when we launch a business, when we go after something that fills our heart. And, sometimes I've gone after things that I felt called to do. I've gone after things that my pocketbook felt called to do. But at the end of the day, where I know that I'm serving the world while serving myself, those are really important ingredients. And I also loved the entrepreneurial cocktail. That was so great. Let me just bring up a few more comments before we really dive into radical self-awareness. And we have Mel. He's down in Brooklyn, and he captured something you said that I think was really wonderful. A master at one or mediocre at many. Oh yeah, we have to be really careful of that. folks. And then Lori, who's over on the left coast, as we say here on the right coast, she says, agree, Stephan. Curiosity drives growth.
Yeah,
You know,
it does.
it really does. We've got a lot of great conversation already happening in the comment stream. Thank you, live viewers, for participating. So let's get into radical self-awareness. How did you come up with this concept, Stephan?
You know, I'd like to take credit for this all by myself, but I have a co-founder who really was a significant piece of radical self-awareness and kind of really bridging that line. And I think we all realize, as we are very business driven and we want to be very business focused, that there's a very personal factor behind it, and a very personal factor which is just us. It's not about the office we sit in, it's not about the business card we give people, it's not about the resume we show people, it's not the story, it's as plain as simple, it's just right here. And when Mona and I, who is a co-founder of the Human Innovation Garage, spoke about, you know, what really makes the most sense, for us it was very clear that as much as I was more an advocate of the side of, let's say, business focus, let's stay very much on the entrepreneur side, on the executive side, on the chairman and the CEOs we work with, from her side, there was a much softer approach to it, which was, yeah, but there's a human being underneath it, and we need to really look at this. And I'm not, and please nobody take offense to that, I don't see myself as a life coach. But the reality is that everybody, if that's a student, if that's an executive, if that's a CEO, all the factors which influence our being and the way we make choices, oftentimes they're very life coaching and life reality related. So when you really think about acting versus reacting, and what we do all day long to all the various stimuli we experience every day, we make, more often than not, people don't make the choice, what is my next reaction or action, more importantly. And what that means then is that if I look at 98% of people, they probably will see something happen and they just react. There is the greatest word I always hear people say is, oh, it triggered me. What do you mean it triggered you? You didn't see that coming, or you didn't know that was going to happen, but you still made the choice, so I hope, to act a certain way. And that's kind of where the sentence stops. That's really where radical self-awareness kicks in, where radical self-awareness comes to a point to say, okay, here is what's happening. Here is what the choices are. And I think anybody who is a parent, and I have children, so anybody who is a parent knows there comes this moment on deciding, how do I want to raise my children? Do I want to be laissez-faire? Do I want to tolerate, you know, when they fall over and they pick up their fingers and they put it in their mouth? Besides that, dirt is great for children, to build their immune system. And do I let them do this or not? Or do I run after them and hover over them the entire day? And good, bad, or indifferent, that's kind of a similar choice you need to make for yourself. And how does that translate into business? Because authenticity from a leadership standpoint is such an important thing. And when I then translate leadership into service, and how do I support, mentor, nurture, coach, educate, give them a lifelong learning experience as my colleagues, and build high-performance teams in that manner, that becomes a huge factor of that. And that's where people really need to recognize why radical self-awareness at the very core, at the very intricate, me, what am I about? What do I need to do? How do I do it? That's where it really starts, and where it kind of, you know, starts the journey. So I apologize. This was a very long-winded answer to a short question, but this is kind of how this all came about.
I love it completely. And I want to bring up Heidi's comment. This is a big step to let go the desire to be seen in a certain way, but just be what we are. Right, Stephan?
You know, this is exactly right. And I said this to you. Somebody made a comment pre-show, and I took great notice of that. So it was a great comment. But one of the things which immediately peeked out on me, and you and I spoke about it a couple of days ago briefly, was, how do we want to be perceived? Well, what does that sentence say? How do we want to be perceived? Is it in a very genuine way? I want to be authentic, and I don't, as you just said, letting go? Or is it, I want to control how people perceive me? In order to get that, I will manipulate everything around me, and I will give you all the following impression. And there's moments to be a certain way and choose grace and choose vulnerability and all these various pieces. That's a choice. But that's not manipulative. But the manipulative piece is if I say certain things because I know that when you hear those, you will see me in a certain way, which is why I'm choosing to do that, but they may not be authentic to me. And that's really where management and leadership, divides. I personally think, and I said it in another podcast not too long ago, the word leadership is completely overused. We tell people, you're a great leader. Well, what does that mean? You're a great manager, you're a taskmaster, you're all this, but you're not a leader. Let's make the distinction between, and I've said it then, politicians and statesmen. And we didn't lose too long ago a great statesman, which was Nelson Mandela. And that's the dimension. There's a lot of politicians, but not so many statesmen. And
well, I think you bring up a really important part, because those who are growing their businesses and they get caught up in what you call compliance-driven leadership. And boy, I talk about this a lot because I see it, whether it's a privately held business that's still answering to the stakeholders, whether those are the investors, venture capital, or the board of directors, to those who are a public company. And they're really serving Wall Street. At the end of the day, all they care about is that quarterly report coming out with their numbers, right? So where did you come up with that compliance-driven thinking? Because I loved it. And how do we switch out of that?
Well, it goes back to, creativity, and it goes back to, I think there's a piece out there where we need to just, not just look at the parameters of what needs to be. And it takes a certain culture. I mean, not being simply compliance driven is a significant culture change, and it's a change. So compliance, and I'm sure we have some legal eagles on the call here. I'm not saying disregard policies, disregard procedures, and go out of compliance to prevent risk mitigation, all these kinds of things. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is let's put the focus of the innovative part of the business at the forefront, and let's look at opportunity versus restriction. Let's be wondrous about it. Let's open it up. And very quickly, when we look at compliance and we look at compliance-driven management, what very quickly we get to is, self-saboteurs. Kind of, what are the pieces we choose not to do because we think, oh my God, if I do this, this will happen. If I don't do this, oh my God, this will happen. So very quickly, these two little things on my shoulders are going to come up and say, do it, don't do it, do it. No, I can't. Here's why. Oh my God. So again, I said it to my students last night, and I say it to young students, old students. I tell myself, fail fast. But I walked last night into class and I said, you don't like the F word. And they all looked at me like, what is he talking about? I said the word failure. Because we don't like to hear the word failure. Because failure in the context of society has become not a good word to be A, confronted with, and B, to have to say to somebody, you have failed. But every failure creates new opportunity. But if I'm strictly compliance driven in my management, I don't take a risk. I don't take a chance. I don't open up the opportunity for myself, nor for people who work with me and for me. And that's the important piece. Again, great leadership empowerment is being of service to people, to take chances and to see what's possible. Somebody many years ago, she created a fabulous tagline. She works in a group in Africa, in Botswana, and she has this tagline, and I'm going to use it, and she will forgive me for me to say it, Audra. Please forgive me formally. But the tagline says, see the invisible, do the impossible.
I love that, Stephan.
Such a fantastic, I'd love to take credit for it. I can't. But it's such a fantastic line when we remind ourselves daily on that, right? Versus kind of the what if versus and.
Yeah.
There's a big difference.
It sure is. Another thing I really like and appreciate about your work is you have an understanding of the complexity that we now have in communicating in a global way, because we have a global community right here on Google Hangouts. on any of the social media platforms, we are conversing on a daily basis with people around the world. What are your thoughts about that?
You know, it's interesting. I was having a conversation with someone about this yesterday. I mean, I think about emails. Emails is without boundaries. Emails is without frontiers, without any kind of delineation of cities, of nations, of continents. And having, and I can only make the example of having to learn how to work and communicate in a country like India. When you write an email going into Southeast Asia, you don't just write, "Hey Andy, take care, see ya." No, that doesn't work. It's very formal. It is, "Dear Andy," you get into some formality just as you would write a letter. "It was so nice to see you today, and it was wonderful that we could," and then at some point during the email, you get to the point, and it's always warm regards or warmest regards. It's very endearing. It's very personalized. We can choose. Again, it goes here also back to radical self-awareness. It's the choice versus the reaction. We've all seen, kind of how we react on emails, because on email, we can write a lot of things which are not written, but they're between the lines. And then we get into our head. We say, this is what they meant, right? But all they may have done is, they may have just not been conscious of it. But by us taking the initiative to be aware of that, which is part of radical self-awareness, by sending an email to somebody where I make myself very aware of the fact, well, they're in Hong Kong, or they're in Chennai, or they're in Botswana. So what is kind of the expected and anticipated and courteous, graceful manner of approaching somebody? That is part of radical self-awareness as well. And so it draws kind of from the very internal side of me to how do I affect my surroundings, which then goes back to what somebody said earlier. You're letting go, but the perceptions you will be getting are so much more favorable, positive. Your leadership style will be affected by it, and the culture you're setting within your organization is just so deeply affected by it.
I love that. I really do. And I think it's important, especially those of us who are live like this in Google Hangouts, to always be honoring of everybody's different communication style and how they are in the world. I mean, yes, I'm certainly honored of our American style. See you, bye. I mean, I've got 2 teenagers. I have hip lingo.
Yeah.
So how did you choose the Bulldog? Because that Bulldog is everywhere as part of your human innovation garage.
I'm a big dog fan. I have a dog myself, and I'm debating a Bulldog as well. We don't have a Bulldog today, but he's the mascot of the Human Innovation Garage. Bulldogs are, they're little teddy bears. They're very sweet. They're very nice, but there's also something about it that don't provoke them. And the provocation is kind of an endearing sense of the equivalent of the intensity of the we're very direct at the Human Innovation Garage. There is no sense in dancing around, and we're not looking for people who need somebody to work with, a strategic advisor, with a business thinker, with a coach. But we want people who recognize their own need to work with somebody. It's because they want to work with us. That's the people we work with. We're selective about the people we work with. Because there is no sense in trying to reshape somebody who is not in the coaching industry. A lot of times people will say is not coachable. It's a choice.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
It's one of those things where you come to us, you get the intensity, you get the nurture, you get the embrace, but also it's a high level of accountability we expect, and it's a high level of deliverables we ask for. A perfect exercise is, you look at time management. I was dealing with somebody who really has affected his personal life quite a bit in terms of never being home and never being available to his significant other. And it becomes a time management exercise of, we've all heard the expression of meeting mania, where we think because we are managers, it goes back to leadership versus, task manager, we need to be at every meeting. Delegation is releasing control. The word control by itself is really interesting. When I talk with people about, well, how do you manage people? And people will say, oh, I can tolerate a different view, and I stop them. And I get into exactly these kinds of words. Because to me, as a Latin scholar, there's a distinct difference between toleration and tolerating and accepting. If I tolerate, I come to you in a position of power. I'm tolerating, I'm allowing, but I'm not accepting. I'm not taking you as a peer, as an equal, as a real partner in whatever we may be discussing or whatever may be the subject. So these are very small distinctions, how, again, taking that and saying, well, think about when you say tolerating. And people pause and they say, interesting. You're right, I'm tolerating. Or when people come to your office, or you go to people's office, and it's one of my favorite exercises, and they put both their hands on your desk and they lean in on you. Well, what are you communicating?
Dominance.
Absolutely. Or look at cocktail receptions or business receptions when people talk to each other. Oftentimes, men in particular, and I love going to a reception and demonstrating it, what they do is we stand next to each other, but we talk to each other while we're looking at everybody else. That's a lovely thing.
Well, that's how I talk to my teenagers. I would never look at my boys and
well, that's what we learn from kids at an early stage, right? They sit in the back of the car and they tell you everything. If they look at you, they don't tell you anything anymore. And then the next level is, as they get older, they start texting each other with their friends. There's complete silence, but they're talking about the last week in seconds on a text message. But so going back to this, it's just a great, again, it's that level of awareness. It's that level of consciousness, mindfulness, consciousness in the presence of others. I not too long ago, I said, you know, the greatest thing is the exercise of hamster yoga. And what I call hamster yoga is we're all little hamsters are running on these wheels, and we're on the mobile devices. I mean, just, we've all seen it and maybe even done it. We go to restaurants and we sit across from each other and we're going like this. And the only time we coordinate is to talk to the waiter that we want the first course and the second course and the third course. Oh, no, I'm not having a third course, so bring the second course first. It is pathetic.
Yes, handhelds should be put into a box whenever you're sitting down with more than one. IMHO.
Yeah, so one of my favorite exercises is when you do a presentation, you know, you have everybody put their phone up and you say, please give it to your right-hand neighbor. It is completely, oh my God, you should see the faces. It's fantastic. And we're talking, you know, like 30 minutes. Give your phone away.
Love it.
I got to give out my control. That's my lifeline.
Why building a better you is so important for your business, everyone. Right, Stephan?
No, it is. And I think it's it's a consciousness exercise. And it's an exercise of, you know, how can it's kind of that, you know, radical self-improvement, radical self-awareness exercise.
Well, Mel has another question for you, if you don't mind too much. He's asking, and others have chimed in as well in the comment section, what motivates you to be who you are in your business and personal affairs?
You know, I love people. That's why I started in the hospitality business, and you know, I thrive around people. I don't do well in isolation. I love to laugh. I'm still a kid at heart, and I love to be able to make a difference. There is no greater joy but having somebody to say to you. I had a client this morning who's building a company say to me, you know, I just want to tell you something. I would not be here without you. I know this sounds cheesy. I said, no, Adam, that doesn't sound cheesy. And sometimes it's hard to hear compliments. And I think as men in particular, we sometimes don't do so well with that. But what motivates me is exactly that. It's seeing somebody making a progress, them really re-engineering themselves. They really feel better about themselves. You know, there's a certain vibe you get from people, which you just can feel that they're doing better. They may make different choices. They may be happier. You know, I mean, I had one really interesting experience. There was a CEO of a company down in New Jersey, big company, and he had brought in a couple of VP levels, and one after the other quit. So we started working with each other, and we started talking, and we did a couple of remote sessions, And without actually much work, he comes and he says, you know, I'm actually resigning from the position of CEO because I don't think I'm good for this business after 16 years to grow it to the level I need to grow it to. And you know what? He was absolutely correct. He was absolutely correct.
Well,
Now
that's radical self-awareness. I love it.
Absolutely. And today his business is flourishing. Him and his wife are enjoying life. He's now president of some collector's car club where he, every week I see a new picture of him and he's standing in front of it on Facebook and is having a blast. And he's enjoying life, right? Because we have to remember, what is it really that we're chasing? It's like this Alan Watts philosopher example of life and music, right? Life should be much more like music, because when Mozart, and that's kind of the gist of the piece, what he talks about, when Mozart writes music, he writes the first note, he enjoys it, he goes to the second note. He doesn't say, well, here's the first note and here's the last note. And nobody really knows where we're arriving. But we try to tell children in this beautiful age of 3, 4, 5 years old, they are curious, they want to discover, they want to touch, they want to smell, they want to eat, they want to do this, everything. And then over the next 10 years, we kind of very systematically, we destroy their curiosity and we tell them, don't do this, you can't do that, you shouldn't be doing this, don't do that. And then at the age of 15, 16, we say to them, well, we want you to be collaborative, innovative. What happened to you? And they should be looking at all of us and say, what did you do to me? And that curiosity, I think as adults, we almost got to kind of go back and really relearn that. Not just about things and objects, but about each other. You know, tolerance, great. Acceptance, much better. Curiosity, vulnerability, communicate with each other. You talked about communication earlier. Communication is a very personal thing, but let it get under your skin. But don't react. Make choices and act.
Wow. And one more question. Mel, thank you. You should be in the room with me asking Stephan these great questions. Mel's wondering, what is your legacy?
You know, I think my biggest legacy is probably, you know, I'd like to say my children, because I think you kind of leave something behind and you hope that they pick up a tool bag which they've learned from you, and they do that. So my daughter in particular, who's now 22, she's very compassionate. She is very engaged also in her service work in some nonprofits. And you know, I said it last week in a faculty meeting. I feel I left something on the table with India still, where a piece of that open education piece and enablement of education and common access, I still feel I need to finish something. What that's going to look like, I really don't know. I don't worry so much about it, because I think it's not my place to say this is my legacy or what I want it to be. I think it's more about how do you affect people and what ultimately they feel the legacy to be. So I don't really wake up in the morning and worry so much about it. But it's a great question. Now you have me thinking about
it. That's wonderful. What do you see on the horizon for Human Innovation Garage?
You know, on the horizon for us really is we're going to continue working a lot with individual clients, but we're actually in the process of starting to develop some webinar series to be able to focus more on weekly seminars as well as on weekend retreats. Particularly, we're looking at some international retreats and some luxury retreats locally, actually in Boston, as well as we're starting to look in San Francisco and in Chicago, which will be an intense weekend, Friday until Sunday. There'll be some life coaching aspects as well. There'll be some some other activities surrounding that. But the intent.
I love the idea, Stephan, of the retreat, because I find that in today's, you're everywhere type of environment, carving that time out to focus, so hyper focus on getting some results, getting some shifts, getting some self-awareness. I love that idea.
Well, I mean, a big part of the reason is somebody who also works in our branch said to me, people say to him, so you're like a therapist. And I've started using his line since then. You're like a therapist. And I said, no, actually I'm not. Because I'm not like a therapist because A, I don't have a license. And B, I get results quickly. And I think that's exactly speaking to the point of a retreat. There's an intense focus. There is some great intensity. There's hot seat exercises. There's a lot of vulnerability and sharing required. There's a lot of peers, which oftentimes become kind of a network and a support system afterwards. And that's really, I think, what we all look for. Right? We're so engrossed in digital media and in social media, and so impersonal. And what's kind of sad is that I think email has become the speed of the USPS of the United States Postal Service, because it's okay now not to respond to your email for a day or 2 or 3 or 4. But text messaging is like kind of that immediacy.
Right.
But that's the piece where I think, when you're on a weekend retreat, you get that, you get that intensity, and you get that piece where you say, wow, that works.
Folks, you can connect with Stephan, humaninnovationgarage.com. And on social media, I have all the links in the archives. Stephan, we've had some many more questions in the comment stream, so I hope that you'll hop in and answer them later. And folks, be sure to come join us in the room. I mean, William Rock, you had a great question. Glenn Jewett, you're awesome. I'm so glad you're not wearing a watch or carrying a cell phone. That's so liberating. And of course, Pamela, it's always a treat and pleasure to see you live. And Lori, to have you in here for the first time in a while. I just loved seeing you there, and many more folks. To those of you who swung by and wanted to join us live but couldn't, I'm waving to you in the replay. Vicky, mwah, Cheryl, mwah, Curtis, mwah, Cherie, mwah. I do this, folks, at the end. I have to, because it means so much to me when folks stop by and say hi in the comment thread at the event invite. And Dave Moore, mwah. And I know I saw you swing by, and so many other people. Thank you, thank you, thank you for watching the replay. I also want to say that next Tuesday, that's May 26th at 1 p.m. Eastern, I have the oh-so-delicious Brandon Schaefer on. And you may know him from at 90 Day Pro or the 90 Day Entrepreneur. And he loves funding and helping entrepreneurial adventurers. Any last words for folks, Stephan, before we wrap up the show?
Just be open to possibility, and less if, rather when.
What? Less rather than?
Less if, rather when.
I love it. And of course, I love the possibility part too. Folks, thank you again for tuning in. It's such a gift to share this time with you, and thank you for gifting yourself and your business by tuning into this conversation. And for those of you in the Afterglow chat, I'll see you in just a few. I'm about to go post the link in the comment section. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for having the courage for being an entrepreneur. Mwah! Wishing you an Andelicious day. Say goodnight or goodbye, Stephan.
Ande, thank you very, very much. Thanks for everybody for listening. And, come and find me. I'd love to have a chat.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.